welcome to the Global Justice Annual Human Trafficking Awareness Forum. This forum is an opportunity to connect individuals from our local communities, national communities, and international communities for the important discussion of the important issue of human trafficking. My name is Sosamma Samuel-Burnett, and I serve as the founder and president of Global Justice, and I'll also be serving as your moderator during this session. If you've joined us in the live audience, we want to thank you for joining us from across the country and across the globe. During this broadcast, you'll be hearing from a range of advocates that will be sharing their experiences and expertise in various parts of the world addressing the issue of human trafficking. And you'll be able to join in the conversation. In the chat bar on your screen, you can put your comments and your questions, and we'll be responding to those as time permits throughout the broadcast. Now, as we begin this session, we want to clarify a couple of things that may be new for some of you. First of all, the topic of human trafficking is widespread. Human trafficking affects children, women, and men throughout the globe, and there really is almost no place in this world where we don't have this scourge. Human trafficking is also a complex topic with a complex definition, and yet, simply put, it is exploitation and it is slavery. While trafficking implies things like motion and movement, it is really about force and about coercion and about treating people unfairly and unjustly in many different ways. This type of abuse is against human rights, and it's against values and dignities of human beings. Now today, I want to introduce to you some wonderful friends and colleagues that are going to be sharing their experiences addressing this issue. So please, panelists, come join me on the screen. Now, as all of our panelists are joining us, I'm going to take this moment to do a brief introduction, and we're going to get to know them more in just a moment. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation today. So I'm just going to go around the squares to do a quick introduction, but first we have Vicky Dix with us. Vicky and her husband work together with a wonderful organization called UCount through Timberline Church. UCount is an anti-trafficking organization that supports many individuals in many parts of the world, particularly in India and other parts of Asia. And we're going to hear more from Vicky in a moment. We also have with us Clayton Butler. Clay has been a long-time employee and colleague, and at the same time has recently become the CEO of Agape International Missions. Clay has been a remarkable advocate, and he is based out of Sacramento, but also working in Cambodia, Belize, and other locations. So welcome, Clay. In addition, we have with us Christa Hagler. Christa is the director of Amanecer, a wonderful organization working with women and others and vulnerable populations in Oaxaca, Mexico, addressing this issue of human trafficking there. So we are so glad to have all of you with us on this occasion. Now, we have a lot to cover and a lot to talk about on this topic of human trafficking, but I think before we get into your work and how we can as a community address this issue, I think we need to know more about each of you and what prompted each of you to become the advocates that you are. So, I'm going to actually start, I think this time with Vicky and then work our way around. But Vicky, let me start with you. Tell me a little bit about your personal story and how you became an anti-trafficking advocate.
Yeah, well, my journey probably didn't start the way most people do. In fact, when I heard about human trafficking 14 years ago and people were asking me to get involved, I really wasn't interested. I was like, that is a topic I don't want to really be involved in. But I actually was staying at home, had my 2 young kids. They were getting ready to go back to school. I have, my background is in accounting, and I have a master's in finance, and really was looking at going back into the working world. And a friend called me and said, hey, we are, in this UCount, I'll tell you more about what we do later, but one of the things they were doing is that they were purchasing product from survivors in India who had come out of the brothels, and they were learning a new trade. And so they were working at purchasing the product from these women and trying to get it to the US. And we're saying, we just really don't know what we're doing, but we know you have a business background and you understand accounting, and can you help us? And so I was like, okay, great. I would love to do that. Just let you know, maybe 6 months is all, because, I didn't really know this human trafficking thing was something I wanted to get involved in. But I did, and I, really spent like 6 months getting everything up and running. And at the end of 6 months, it was like, I was hooked. And so, 15 years later, I'm still doing this. I'm involved in this work, and I love it. But what I love most is just about how God even just took my skills of what I was doing, what I, and learned how to use it for, a cause that he was really interested in. And so anyway, that's how I originally got involved in just being able to use, my business background. So.
Great. And, I really appreciate you saying that, because there's so many people out there that, just don't feel like, they're an advocate, but yet you showed that with your experience and your background in business, you're able to be a really wonderful support and advocate on this issue. So thank you for sharing that. Next, I'm going to go to Clay. So Clay, same thing, tell us a little bit about your background and then also how you became this anti-trafficking advocate.
Yeah. Fairly simple thought. When I was young, I read James 1:27. I'm talking about it, so I should probably quote it right. But it's pure, spotless religion is taking care of orphans and widows in their distress and keeping oneself from being polluted by the world. It's either James 1:27 or 1:26. Whoever is the most spiritual on the call can put it in the chat line. But as a young guy, yeah. Okay, it was 26. Is that what it was, Sosamma?
No, I said Google it quick.
Oh, okay. But yeah, whoever, and so I was a young person, and I just thought, wow, that really hit me, and I wanted to live that. And so I just prayed the Lord would grow that area of my heart, and God brought a lot of mentors and leaders in my life that allowed me to go on mission trips. And when I was coming out of college, I tell people, and I'm only half joking, I was young, dumb, and single, and I thought, what type of opportunities do you pursue when you're young, dumb, and single, and you love Jesus? And so I thought anti-trafficking is one of those ones that, before you're married and have kids, you can do riskier, crazier things. And I thought this is one of those ones that, boy, this is a great opportunity for the season God has. And I got to work with Agape International Missions. It was a fast-growing organization, still is, but got to work in the red light district, and we planted a church in one of the toughest red light districts and saw Jesus take over that town. And that's not bragging about AIM, that's bragging about who God is. And so I think that's what keeps me kind of in the fight, seeing how passionate Jesus is for this issue. But yeah, I could tell a lot of stories, probably too many stories, but I think getting in on the ground really affected me, seeing the lives directly. And, years later, here I am. Just recently became the CEO, and it's exciting and terrifying. And it's terrifying when I think about my capacity to affect change, but it's exciting when I think about God and how passionate he is for this issue. So that's enough about me, and someone can tell me if it was James 1:27 or 1:26 at some point.
We're going to check that. Now, what I wanted to tell you, Clay, is I so appreciate a couple of things that you shared. One is the fact that you were prompted by Scripture. Each of us comes from different faith backgrounds and perspectives, but the idea that God is a God of justice really can motivate many people to become advocates, and it certainly did for you. And secondarily, I love the fact that you're a guy. When we talk about human trafficking, we need as many men as possible in this fight. It's not just a women's issue or a men's issue. It is an everybody's issue. And so we need everybody to be advocates, men, women, and children. And then lastly, this idea that you just stepped forward, whether you felt fully equipped or not, you stepped forward when God called. And I think that that's a really important part for many people to know and understand too. Now, I want to also take us over to Christa Hagler. Christa is the director of Amanecer. And Amanecer, as I mentioned, is in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I'm so excited, Christa, for you to share a little bit of your background and what prompted you to become an anti-trafficking advocate.
Yes, thank you. My first response was on accident. I kind of stumbled into it, at least by my part. It's never an accident with God, but for me, it was not what I set out to do. My family actually became missionaries with the United World Mission and moved to Oaxaca. We've been here for 10 years and initially came to work with indigenous populations here in Oaxaca, Mexico, and had nothing to do nor any desire to work with sex trafficking or anything like that, but God had other plans. So eventually, as our lives changed, I have 4 kids, and so as our kids got older and life changed, we found ourselves in the city more and not as able to go into the indigenous communities. We also had some communities experience persecution and were forced to leave, and so some of our contacts were lessening in the villages, and so we were just feeling more called into the city to be here in the city. And so I just started praying, like, you have me here. We don't feel like you're asking us to move physically to another location. So God, what do you want? What do you want that to look like? And as I began praying about that, he put on my heart this issue of trafficking, and it was kind of a huge issue. I knew nothing about it in Oaxaca. I had no idea where it happened, what it looked like. I had no idea. And so I just started praying about it and said, if you want me to do this, then you're going to have to show me how and where. And I think it was 2 weeks later that I met a group of women who were beginning to prayer walk the red light districts in Oaxaca, Mexico, and they invited me to be a part of that team. And so that was our beginning, as we started prayer walking the streets and just trying to become knowledgeable and educated. And that was in 2016 when that happened. And so there was just a gradual shift. And from 2016 to now, there has continued to be a gradual shift. I mean, in the beginning, I tried to maintain both different roles in different areas, and more I've gotten pulled into this area of sex trafficking and working with women in situations of prostitution. And now with Amanecer, which I'll talk about more in a little bit, we're doing some social enterprise type things. And so it's just become, just one step of obedience, and God has led. But it was definitely not intentional that I set out to, I didn't read a verse like Clay did and set out with this great intention to work in this population. But, God is faithful, and he places us where he wants us and where he needs us. And so it's been a journey. Yeah.
It's remarkable with all 3 of you on some level had just took one step. I think it's not necessarily this designed to pre-plan thing. It was just simply God calling and you responding. And, interestingly, I had worked in Oaxaca, Mexico many years ago in human rights work, and most people don't know where Oaxaca, Mexico is. And here Christa is there, seated fully there to help many people in that community. And it's a community of tremendous poverty, of tremendous need. And so the fact that this is what your calling is, I think it's just remarkable. And that, it wasn't your design, and yet was God's design. And it's just remarkable. Well, I'm so grateful that each of you took that step. I'm so grateful that each of you have shared a little bit of your background and how you came to this work. But now let's talk also about that work. Each of you are involved with organizations that are doing some really remarkable things for various communities around the globe. And this time I'll start with you, Clay. Give us an overview, especially for our audience that may not know Agape International Missions. Tell us about this organization and what it does to address this issue.
So we operate in 4 pillars. Rescue. We have an agreement with the Cambodian government. We have law enforcement on our staff, and we have our staff on law enforcement. We have a hybrid department under the anti-trafficking police called AIM SWAT. And we report straight to a general, so we get good warrants, so we're able to rescue. It's great. And then when girls are rescued and women are rescued, we have a restoration home, a high security restoration home. We have a capacity of 50. We've been over capacity for like 4 years, which is a good godly problem to have. It's hard to say when there's an opportunity to rescue. And you're saying, well, there's not enough space. You kind of try to start to figure it out. But in general, we have rescue, we have restoration, we have reintegration type components of work, which is job training We have a program where we help girls find jobs, but then we also have jobs for girls who specifically over 18 who are rescued and need immediate employment with childcare built into the employment situation. We make garments, so we make t-shirts, we make some jewelry, and so we try to do more large orders like VBS shirts, church shirts. That's been our bread and butter of large churches that are doing events that want a screen printed shirt. We've dabbled in our own product of, making blank tees and pocket tees and different things like that. And it's not as successful as we want it. We haven't been able to make that as profitable. I'm sure both Vicky and Christa can, maybe Vicky can help us, but it's a real challenge. But and then the last one is we have a lot of prevention work. So what's great is we are rescuing girls and we are providing restoration care. So we have a good sense of where the red light districts are and where the communities are, where that are the source and the epicenters of the challenge. And so about 12 years ago, maybe even more than that, 15 years ago, we did something audacious, which is we didn't really have a plan, but we said, hey, let's plant a church in the red light district and figure out what God wants to do. And out of that church, we launched school programs, we launched sports programs for at-risk youth, medical programs, all sorts of stuff. And those actually became independent schools, kickboxing gym, and all sorts of stuff. But God just took over that community. And we now get to talk in past tense about that community being a red light district. We have a thriving church there, about 400 people in the church. That we sent out a mission trip from that red light district to another area. And now we're in an exciting spot where we're actually looking at some other communities where God might be calling us to wrap around the churches and other red light districts. So lots of stuff: prevent, rescue, restore, reintegrate, 4 words. But so we're doing all sorts of activities, and we're getting our footing in the country of Belize to start establishing that holistic model in the country of Belize as well.
Yeah, it is so exciting. And one of the things I love so much about AIM, Agape International Missions, is that you are holistic. You take all of these elements. Those 4 pillars are really the 4 areas that every survivor needs to be able to move forward. You need to be restored and rescued and all of those things, but you need that opportunity as well, to be able to make a living, to be able to, be fully engaged citizens. That's really difficult once you're rescued. In most cultures, and especially in places like Cambodia, being rescued is not the end of the story, because once you're rescued, you have no place and space in that community. Now, Clay, if you would, give us a little bit of just a quick snapshot of Cambodia. That particular country is unique in many different ways, and there's a context there for human trafficking. Tell us a little bit about that so we can understand this work in that context.
Every culture has a lot of detailed nuance, but I would say the biggest broad strokes is in the 70s, they had a massive genocide, and it's a very unique genocide, is that it wasn't one people group versus another, it was a class related genocide, working class versus the educated class. And then the Vietnam War kind of spilled out over into Cambodia and displaced that communist regime. And what was interesting was, they killed about 3 million people, and a lot of times part of that regime was breaking down the family structure of saying kids don't belong to parents, kids belong to the state. And at some point they had the kids spying on and ratting out their parents that might even result in execution. And so you talk about all this chaos, and then those people became the parents and leaders of the current generation. So highly traumatized generation, didn't have parenting modeled for them. So pretty low view of life, when you grew up of having people killed around you or even having killed people. So it kind of created a real, you see a parent that's trafficking their kids and they're saying, hey, it was much worse for me. This isn't even that bad, but you have parents that kind of have that mindset. So there's a massive, you can see where the church has to be the answer. It can't just be as simple as, hey, we're going to go rescue some girls. It's how do we reinstill the value of life in a country? How do we rebuild family and model family and institute a value structure? And so it's been it's exciting, because I think as dire as that situation is, it's also really ripe for hope. The young generation of people just really gravitate towards hope of opportunity to see their country moving forward. And so really tough situation, and actually also one of the most beautiful is you see bringing to life out of a really tough, dark season of their history. So hopefully that's enough broad strokes of why trafficking kind of has thrived in this community and country.
Right. Well, thank you so much for sharing that context too. I think it helps everyone, have some perspective of why it was so critical to do that work in that nation, but also around the globe. So let's shift now from East Asia to Mexico. And Christa, you are in Oaxaca, Mexico. Tell us a little bit about Amanecer. What is this organization? What is it about? What does it do? And then maybe also a little context in which you're doing that work.
Okay. Well, Amanecer, we actually really enjoyed hearing Clay and his answer. I think one of the biggest things that I am seeing is the need to constantly be learning. And so I'm very encouraged to hear you share and learn more about Agape. Amanecer is new. We started about a year ago. We are doing a social enterprise where we're selling jewelry and teaching the women how to make jewelry, doing some of the holistic care and restoration and different types of classes, discipleship, spiritual, mental, emotional areas that we're trying to touch, as well as job skills and all of those kind of things. And so we are learning. The last year has probably been one of the steepest learning curves in my life. I do not have the business background that Vicky has. I studied counseling, and so this is all new for me, and God has just had me learning like crazy. And so I'm thankful to get to be a part of this with you guys also and learn from you. But beyond that, so Amanecer launched officially last February. It's almost been 1 year. It's been amazing to see what God has done and his faithfulness. As I said, it started out of the ministry of just prayer walking on the streets. And so we have a larger ministry that's called Girasol, which means sunflower in Spanish. And Girasol is our kind of larger organization that we house under as Amanecer, and Girasol is our outreach to women in situations of prostitution. So in 2016, we started just going out on the street, prayer walking. We did our very first outreach in December of 2016, which was Christmas gifts and our first contact with the women. And then the Lord provided a ministry building for us in 2019, which is on that street that we target that group of women. And we're able to use that as a drop-in center to teach classes and to do different things there with the women, and really view ourselves primarily that our main role is just to extend hope in a really dark place. And so prostitution is actually legal in Oaxaca, and most of the women, so the criteria to make it legal is it cannot be there cannot be trafficking happening, and you cannot be a minor. And if you meet those two criteria, it's legal to do it. And so most of the women we work with, it takes a lot of trust for them to even begin to really share their stories, because they're living under this reality that if they tell us that they're being trafficked, then now we've entered into an illegal situation. And so although many of them are being trafficked, I would say almost all of them were trafficked initially into sex trafficking. Their initial introduction into it was trafficking. Some of them now are not currently being trafficked, but remain because that's all they've ever known. When you start being trafficked when you're 14, 15, 16 years old, you don't have a skill set. And so when you get out of that situation of being controlled physically, you're still controlled in many ways, psychologically, emotionally, and in every other way. And so that's what we see with a lot of our women is some of them cannot leave because they're being trafficked. Some of them have the freedom to leave, but don't know how to do that. And so we're there just to kind of be a beacon of hope and a beacon of light and bring goodness. And we really like to have celebrations. So any chance we have to have a birthday party for the girls, we have a birthday party, Christmas celebrations. That's because they love it and they don't get celebrated often enough. And these women are women who've just endured so much hurt and trauma and need to know their value and need to know how loved they are and seen by humans, but that's only a reflection of what God does and how God sees them and loves them. And so that's what we try to do. And then as they begin to show interest in wanting to leave, Amanecer was kind of started to give them practical steps to get their feet under the ground, to start walking in something different. And then we also work with women who are coming out of severe poverty, who would be at risk for situations of prostitution and trafficking. And the idea is that they don't stay with us necessarily long term at Amanecer, but that they stay long enough to kind of get some stability, learn their value, learn their worth, and that we also help them in training for job skills and other things, and hope to see them launch into different directions in their future. And so that's a summary of what we do.
That's wonderful, and so much you've done in such a short period of time. It's just remarkable. And for those that are not Spanish speakers, tell everyone what Amanecer means and why you chose that as your title for the organization.
Yes, thank you. I forgot about that. Amanecer is dawn, and so just that new beginning was the idea behind Amanecer, to have a new start, which is what we hope to provide for the women.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christa, for sharing that. Now, Vicky, you are with UCount, and UCount is tremendous ministry as well. And would you share a little bit about what that is and where it's making an impact?
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to start off from how did UCount even get formed, and then kind of explain what our mission is and what we continue to do today. So our founder in 2007 was in India, and it was looking at the red light districts in Mumbai and New Delhi and Calcutta, and just really was heartbroken, and came home and said, I've got to do something about this over there. So she worked in a partnership with Project Rescue, who was actually on the front lines and working in India, and said, hey, can I work with you? I want to build a home in Calcutta for women who are working in the Sonagachi red light district, that they can have a way out and exit and get a place where they could live, where they can just start over. And so just really, that was her first mission, and that's just all that she wanted to do. And so I'm actually in Fort Collins, attend Timberline Church here. And so our founder came back to Timberline Church and said, this is what I want to do. I want to raise funds to start this home right outside of the red light district in Calcutta. And so that was the first thing that kind of got this off and running. And then another volunteer came in and said, well, we know that these women who, I guess I should step back, but Project Rescue working there, they were actually working with women and had a place for them where they could come learn a new trade. And so they were learning to make products and learning to make sari quilts and purses. And so the other thing is, this other volunteer, her name was Lisa Christopherson, said, you know what, I know the women there are making these products. Let's also, besides building this home, let's start purchasing these products, bring it back to the States. And, women love to shop, we can sell it. So that was kind of the grassroots of how UCount came to be. And when they were just looking at why do we even name UCount, it's, if you guys didn't notice before, but it's a capital U and then there's the word count afterwards. And it's just saying that, you know, in this fight, we are, not all of us are on the front lines working, but yet we all count in fighting human trafficking. And so it is the people on the front lines. It is the people who are purchasing product, it's the people donating, it's the communities, you know, just the citizen. And, you know, it's even the survivors. They all count in law enforcement. We all count in this fight if we're ever going to, you know, ever abolish it. And so anyway, that's the kind of how UCount came to be. Our mission is that we fight global and local sex trafficking through prevention, awareness, and restoration. We really do that on 3 fronts. So we continue to raise funds for global projects. So like that Home of Hope, we continue to raise funds for other projects around the world. And so far we have raised $2.7 million and have given that to frontline organizations. We also have local efforts. So we have volunteers here. Just last November, we put care packages together for women who are currently being exploited here in the United States. We have helped sponsor the Northern Crowded Symposium, which is, those of you have been involved in with that, but you know, our volunteers can go and help with that event. Just, we even have men who are involved in a team that we call the EPIC team, and they, once a month, they make phone calls where they try to disrupt demand here in the United States. And then our third initiative is really the marketplace that I've been talking about, and that's how I got involved with working on the business side. But we purchase product from various organizations in India, as well as Europe. We have some in Guatemala, and then just in the last 2 years, we have started purchasing product from survivors that are making product right here in Northern Colorado. And this last year we did $100,000 worth of product, and we are this close from the conception of reaching $1 million in sales of products made by survivors or those that are at risk. So it's a huge milestone, I feel like, for us of what we've been able to accomplish these last 15 years. But that is UCount and how it came to be. And so, yeah, and then I should say too, in 2019, that is when the founder really stepped down, and then my husband and I stepped in as executive directors. And so we are an organization that works out of Timberline Church in Fort Collins. We're just a group of volunteers, and there's about 120 that are on our volunteer list that help out throughout the year. And so, yeah, we're just really supporting those who work on the front lines. And I just think it's great because it's really a way for everyone can kind of help get involved. And even if you don't feel like you have the skill sets like Christa and Clay do of, you know, working with people into, you know, at the need. But anyway, that is what we do.
Wonderful. Vicki, it's incredible what you've accomplished in that time frame. 15 years has been just 15 years of tremendous ministry, and affecting so many communities, but also just engaging so many individuals in the fight. So thank you so much for all you do through UCount. Now, if you are just joining us in the audience, I want to remind you that you are here at our Human Trafficking Awareness Forum. This annual online forum is an opportunity to bring the community together, the local, national, and international community together, to really discuss the issue of human trafficking. And each year we bring together advocates from around the world to talk about their work and how we, as just general citizens, can engage in that work. So I want to remind all of you that are online that you have an option through your chat bar to put in your comments and questions to our presenters at any time during this broadcast, and we will try to respond to those questions as time permits as we carry on through this time. Now, I want to sort of switch gears a little bit and maybe pick up a little bit where, you know, Vicki had mentioned about prevention, awareness, etc. As you all know, this is an awareness forum, and human trafficking is a difficult topic. And for those that might have missed the little brief overview that we did at the beginning, human trafficking is kind of comes in many forms. There is trafficking for labor, there's trafficking for sex, There's various forms such as cyber trafficking. There's trafficking in a wide variety of contexts for different age groups. And so it is really complex. As an industry, sex trafficking alone is probably one of the largest industries in the entire world, ranging at like $250 billion a year. I mean, that's remarkable. Sex trafficking in it alone is now picking up so much speed that what we're looking at is not just about 50%, but maybe even upwards of 75% of trafficking now becoming sex trafficking. And what's interesting is where arms trafficking and drug trafficking are considered the largest forms in terms of the larger, crimes of the world, human trafficking is becoming much faster in its pace to outpace those two, right? So think about drug trafficking, think about arms trafficking, how pervasive they are, and human trafficking is becoming even more so. And, what one time I had shared in a workshop to help people understand the significance of human trafficking, to compare drug trafficking and human trafficking in this way. When you use a drug, you use it once and it's gone. When you use a person, you can continue to abuse that person over and over and over again. So for a trafficker, it is much more lucrative to have a human being to abuse than any of these other forms that we talk about with trafficking. So that's the kind and scale of impact we're talking about of this terrible crimes, since it comes in so many forms. So with that, I want to have each of you talk a little bit about this awareness piece. Why is it so important for people to know about this? Yes, it's a difficult topic, and yes, a lot of people want to maybe close their eyes to what's happening, but why is it so important for us to talk about this topic? And Christa, I'm going to start with you.
Thank you. I think the first thing that comes to mind is it's such a big, complex topic, like you talked about. And so if people aren't aware, there's a sense that it can't happen to me, it can't happen in my community, it can't happen to my next door neighbor. And what we're seeing more and more is that's just not reality. I am in a context outside of the United States dealing with sex trafficking. The women here may be vulnerable for different reasons. Poverty is a major factor, obviously, for us that we deal with here in Oaxaca and in Mexico, but and it's a factor all over the world. But in the U.S., there's more and more trafficking happening, and I think that there's been a blindness to even be willing to see it and recognize it. And so as people become more aware, they are able to talk about it in their own homes, to educate their own children. I mean, the family is a huge piece of combating trafficking, having healthy families, having healthy places where kids can grow. And so the more that we educate, the more we provide awareness and knowledge, and people, the average everyday person becomes aware, the more they can begin to play a role in that, in whatever small way that is. Just being aware of what they're seeing around them in their own communities, and being willing to make a report if they see something that looks out of line or out of place, to having the bigger awareness, being able to raise funds, being able to support other ministries who may be able to be a little bit more hands-on than some people can. But first we have to be educated and aware, or we can't even step into the battle. And so and it is a battle. It's not a small issue or a small cause, and there's so many different fronts that we can participate in, whether it's prevention, lowering demand. All of these things are key components, and so there's a piece everybody can play, but the first place is education and awareness, for people to even know how to begin, and having that curiosity to ask God, like, what would my role be in this? What do you want me to do? And it may be what feels like a very small role, or it may be a much more substantial role, but everybody being aware and educated makes a difference. And so we can't educate too much. I'm thankful that there is more awareness, and we see it happening and growing and people becoming more aware, but we're still lacking so much in education and prevention and making a gateway in this cause. So.
Right. It is the first step, but it's such a necessary first step, and it's so widely needed. I think that's a great point that you raised too, Christa, that so much more can be learned. about this in so many different regions. Vicky, sort of similar question. When you think about this sort of awareness, given the work that you do, you're working with so many volunteers and people in the church community and other communities that may not know what this is. Why is awareness so important?
Right. Well, first of all, I'm going to tag on what Christa said. Like 2007, when we started this organization, no one hardly even understood what it was. And so it's great to know that at least like there's forums like this, there's a lot more discussion around this topic than there was a long time ago. But I will have to say, like, yeah, we can't fight this if we're not aware of it's happening and how it's happening. And so it's very important to create and raise awareness for this topic. I also think just for us to be able to change policy in the US, we need to understand, what is human trafficking and how does it work, and, how can we, change policy? And you can't do any of that if you're not aware of what the issues are. And I really think it's important to even educate our youth, because their youth and those that are in just vulnerable populations maybe don't even understand. And if they're educated, then at least if they become in a situation where this might be happening to them, they can go, I've been educated on this. I was aware of this. I know kind of what's happening. And so definitely there's just a lot of making people aware that what's out there, and then they know what they're fighting and what they're looking for. And so anyway, definitely, raising awareness is our first step in being able to fight this. And so I'm just going to tag on a little story here as well. We support an organization called Stop the Traffic, and they work around the world at trying to create prevention. And one of the things that they were able to do in Kenya is they were able to find that when they were able, traffickers were coming in and telling girls like, hey, you can go to Europe and you're going to be cleaning and, all these great things going on. And kind of as a ploy and just a little gift to give them, they would give them a purse. And then lo and behold, they realized that, it's this purse is kind of really what the traffickers were using. And so they were able to go in and just educate the community to say, hey, if your daughters and different people are, talking to people about going to Europe and you're given this purse, like, that's not really what's happening. It's just all a scam. And so I think just be able to create that awareness. And if we can do certain things to prevent, even from people, like I was saying with the youth, from preventing them from ever even getting into situations, like we've been able to stop it. So just a lot of awareness, and then, it just goes into being able to prevent this and to change policies so that we can maybe reduce demand or things like that. But anyway, just thank you for today, for just this forum. It just creates, awareness among our citizens and here in the US. So.
Well, thank you so much, Vicky. And I think, you raised so many important points, but one of them I want to pull out is this idea of prevention. And, in our own community, we're in Loveland, you're in Fort Collins, we're right close to each other here in Colorado. And right in our communities, we have human trafficking. And, a lot of it comes from vulnerabilities. And so when we have certain individuals and certain populations that are vulnerable, they're more likely to be trafficked. And so we need to address those vulnerabilities, maybe even before the trafficking, right? Whether it's people that are in foster care, whether people who are dealing with poverty in general, kids that are runaways, kids that are just struggling at school in various contexts. There's so many different things that we can as citizens just be alert and aware of to help sort of bridge that gap. And, maybe then we don't have to fight trafficking as much as we are helping and supporting people so that they never get into that vulnerability, right? So I really appreciate what you're sharing about that. Clay, coming back to you, we've talked about the importance of awareness. Now, people need to be aware in their local communities, but also what's going on around the globe. Tell us why it's so important to be aware of trafficking in the work that you're doing.
I don't want to be too contrary. It depends on what we mean by awareness, because I actually think it's super detrimental just to talk about the problem. I think people get grossed out about it, and feel discouraged. And you know, uh, all of us have been in this for a long time. I remember when we first started, like you say, human trafficking, people had zero concept. Now they roughly know. Now you're more likely to get someone giving you like a nuanced opinion if you bring up human trafficking. So people are aware of it.
Right.
Awareness needs to happen with a clear action step of how someone can be part of a solution. Awareness without an act step breeds hopelessness to me. I think, and you see this with all sorts of issues. We just think we'll hit a critical mass and somehow something will start to magically go well, but there has to be some action step. I really like what Christa was talking about. She just started prayer walking. There's just something. It's like, if this is the action step that's in front of me, I'll just take this action step and figure out what's next. So I think awareness is a double, I don't know what the right analogy is. It can be horrible or it could be really good. And I think that the difference between it being bad and productive is having a clear action step for someone to take. Because I've seen it to where you move and you break people's hearts and they say, what can I do? And it's kind of like, well, move overseas, become an investigator, sell everything. But you have to have something. All the way down from move overseas, become an investigator, to buy a shirt, sell a shirt, tell your friends. You have to have some way for people to engage. And so I've seen it done well, and I've seen it be more. I've seen it where people get the catharsis of, I'm part of the solution just because I know how bad it is, and that's not a good thing. That people feel because they're educated on the issue, they feel like they're somehow driving towards a solution, and that's not accurate. Anyways, I'm beating a dead horse now. Awareness and action. There we go.
Well, it's the double-edged sword that you're referencing or about to reference, I think is very well put. It is important for everyone, especially for our audience that's engaging in this conversation, to know that it does start with awareness, but it can't stop at awareness, right? And I think that's the point that you're all making. Awareness is the first step, and then it requires action. Even our forum today, we've been talking about this as a human trafficking awareness forum, but our tagline is advocacy to action, because you can't stop at just information. Information is a starting point. The one thing I also want to highlight from what you shared, Clay, is also misinformation. That's also important for us to just note. People think all kinds of things about all kinds of things nowadays, right? And we get a lot of information, when we joked about earlier about Googling, right? You can get online, you can find all kinds of things, and you can find all kinds of things that contradict. But at the end of the day, human trafficking is about people. And we have to remember that people are affected and their sensitivities. One of the things that I want to always caution people is that when you are exploring this realm, it is a dark realm. And I highly recommend that people don't walk into the darkness of it, that instead they focus on the light of it, bringing awareness, bringing action, but not dwelling on the really nasty stuff that is happening in this world of trafficking, right? Because people can get kind of caught up in that. And that becomes a problem. The second is people's views can get in the way, to think that it doesn't happen in our backyard, or someone put themselves into that context, and so maybe they're, making that choice to go into those realms. We hear that a lot in prostitution, for example, and there are people who say that that's a choice. That's a job. That's something that they opt to do, and they really miss the other parts of this, the coercion, the abuse, and everything else that goes into it. So I think it's really important for us to have eyes wide open, but to really be focusing on what we can do to stem this tide versus being caught up in it, right? And I think that that's going to be a very important sort of message for all of us to absorb during this time together. Now, I want to sort of shift from what you've shared about awareness and to talk a little bit about some of the challenges, right? So human trafficking is a huge topic. Human trafficking is one of the more difficult topics for us, not just to talk about, but to actually address. So I want to start with you, Vicky, this time, and just say, okay, when you're thinking about this humongous topic, there are many things that are challenges, but what's a particularly difficult aspect of this in terms of advocacy in your mind?
I'm sorry, can you replace that again? What were you asking?
Sure. What's a particularly difficult aspect of fighting human trafficking?
Okay, sorry, thank you.
Mhm.
Yes, I just think we have to reduce the demand even in order to fight this. And I think, if there was no demand, we wouldn't have trafficking. But I think just even right here in the US or here in Colorado, it's just, they've changed the laws where it's just a petty offense for someone that solicits prostitution. So really, what are ways that we can change to change the demand? And I think that even goes back with the way our culture is, the way, the social media we look at, the movies we see, the different things we've become, we're really kind of just, we're just, I guess, I forgot the word that I'm trying to say, but it just, so much in our social media, it's just there in our culture. And so it doesn't shock us. Maybe that's what I'm saying. It doesn't shock us like it used to. And so anyway, I think it's just, really changing some of our culture and then just changing the demand for trafficking. And so many of our youth and different things, they get pulled into pornography. And that's just a beginning of a little step of that then escalates into trafficking and their demand and soliciting sex. And so just I feel like if there's ways that we can change our culture, that they realize like this is not acceptable and that we could reduce demand, I think it would just be one of the big things, I think, at least here in the US, to just change of trafficking and being able to reduce it and what's happening here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point, Vicki. We are inundated, right? I mean, everywhere we turn, we have images, we have messages, we have all kinds of things in all forms of media. And, when we think about, Hollywood, there's a lot of glorification of, rape culture and things like that. And I think it's really, it really is getting to the heart of why there is such a high demand. And that is a very, very difficult, huge problem to overcome. And I think that is the impediment at the moment, right? Clay, let me get to you also, when you're talking about, this really large issue and you're working on a day in, day out, there are many concerns, but what's a particularly difficult impediment to addressing this issue?
Yeah, I'll just kind of speak practically and organizationally. So this is probably more specific to one of the challenges we have is getting buy-in on the journey of restoration and the costs around that. Donors can be generous for this issue, but in general, they like the rescue part and they like buildings. Buildings don't love people. Staff love people, and so trying to get those ongoing costs for counselors, house moms that are essential to the restoration process are harder to get donors around that. And the rescue portion is, hey, how much does it cost to get a bunch of cops in a van, social workers, go out there? It's just like, oh, you can say for $1,000 we can rescue, but the restorative care, substantial. That could be like, could be like 70 grand for each girl, if we're talking over the lifetime of their care, and helping people understand and do a long-term commitment to that. So how cost-effective prevention is if you do it right, if you can actually truly connect it to truly prove this actual prevention of sex trafficking, how cost-effective that is, rather than rescuing someone and doing the restorative care. So, yeah, some of the challenges we're having is more of a discipleship aspect around giving and discipleship around what the long-term process looks like to provide comprehensive restorative care for victims of trafficking. So we don't have the answer to that yet, but it is a challenge that we have. We have a lot of people who want to buy the building, but don't want to sponsor the house mom. And yeah, buildings come and go, but house moms are awesome.
They are, and they are the ones that provide that love and care, as you mentioned. They make all the difference. I want to sort of highlight what you said, Clay, in the broader context. We are all individuals here that are a part of nonprofit organizations that are working in various advocacy capacities. And for our audience watching, when Clay talks about what he talked about, it's not about fundraising. It's really about support. And support can come in lots of different forms, but a lot of times when people are trying to support organizations, it really has to do with, that sort of jazzy thing, that thing in front of them that makes them feel like, wow, I've done something. It could be something, graphic. It could be something difficult. It could be that child that's in tears, and it affects you emotionally, and people want to give to that. But true work in this arena is much longer and much harder and much less sexy, if you want to call it that, right? It is really about taking every day as it comes and helping to walk alongside these individuals. And that doesn't play as well in media, right? But it's extremely important. And I want all of us, as community members, to understand that long-term supports of these organizations make a huge difference. And supports that have people that really start investing not just their time, but their talents, their treasures, their interests, just getting more informed, getting more engaged, it makes all the difference. And so we want to just sort of outline that a little bit. Now, Christa, I want to come over to you now. I did want to just ask you the same sort of question, in terms of, you're just starting off. This is a difficult, area. This is a difficult topic. But what do you feel is one of your most significant impediments to addressing this issue?
Well, one I had written down or had thought of ahead of time was the demand, which has already been addressed. And so I'm going to leave that one. And the second one that I think has been the most surprising, and I'm going to try and communicate this in a way that's succinct and communicates what I want to communicate. But the issue I mentioned a little bit earlier is healthy families. I think that's a huge piece of prevention. It's a huge piece of, I loved the model that Clay talked about in the community where they were able to plant a church, and that the growth that they've seen among those people, and they're seeing healthy families, and there's no longer a red light district in that area. That's an amazing story. And so going back and learning how to address lack of health and vulnerabilities that come from unhealthy families, from abusive situations, from whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse that's happening to children in our homes. That is prevention. Doing that work is also a leg of prevention. One of the things that's been the most surprising to me in the ministry and the work that we do with the women that we work with, I've met some of they often call them husbands because obviously they can't use other language because of legality. But I've met some of them, and I have been shocked at the relational aspect that there is between the men and the women. That I think a lot of times we think when we reflect on sex trafficking and pimps and men like this, I think that we have the idea that there's no relational aspect. But a big piece of how these men control women is through a relational component. And there is, although unhealthy and distorted and ugly, there is often a sense of care, a mutual care between these men and women on some level, as hard as that is to understand. And had I not seen it, I don't know if I would have believed it. And so really reaching into those family issues, those needs that we have as human beings to be seen and heard and valued and loved and treated with respect. So those are some of the bigger systemic issues that don't just exist in Mexico, but exist around the world. And we see those play out in so many of the sinfulness of man, and we see it play out in so many different ways. And so addressing those bigger systemic familial issues I think is a key component in addressing trafficking. And it's been a big surprise for me and something I've really struggled with, because I had my own ideas of what it means to be a pimp and what it means to be someone who traffics someone else. And those have all been broken and destroyed as I've actually engaged real human beings and real people in the context that I work in here in Mexico, that it is much more complex, and so much of it stems from a need to feel like you have a place and that you belong somewhere. And if it's an unhealthy place, sometimes that gives a lot of vulnerability to women. And so the familial issues, I think, are huge. And I don't yet have very many great answers or ideas, but it is a need, and it's something that we pray about really consistently. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, it absolutely does. I really appreciate you sharing that. You know, I mean, the socioeconomic dynamics of human trafficking is really complex, and it's not just complex globally, it's complex at a micro level in each community. You know, it's different in Mexico than it is in Cambodia, than it is in India, even though it's all the same at the same time. You know, the dynamics are completely different. And sometimes even our methodologies will have to be a little bit different in advocacy depending on which culture and region we're dealing with. And I think many organizations discovered that they can't do the one size fits all. They can't do the same thing in all places. And, you know, some of what you described, you know, like just by analogy, if you think about, for example, gangs, you know, a lot of times we can look at gangs and just go, you know, this is just a terrible thing and there, you know, terrible things are happening. But if you actually look and study the underlying issues, it is about belonging, right? You're part of something. And even if it's something not so good, there is a certain care structure and things like that. And there is similarities, not identical, but similarities in what you're describing in terms of even trafficking dynamics, right? So there's a lot of different things that make this very complicated. But I think the biggest thing is what you also addressed is that, you know, helping us to understand each region. You know, it goes back to this awareness piece. Like before you step in as an advocate, you have to kind of learn. Right? You need to learn not just the topic, but get to know the people, you know, have a chance to be among them. You know, the fact that you were doing prayer walking was remarkable because you're among the people. You got to know and see people in a way that maybe others haven't. And I think that's great. Now, if you're just joining us here, this is the Human Trafficking Awareness Forum that we host each year to have various members of our community come together to talk about this issue of human trafficking, and not just to discuss it, but to really think about action steps and ways for the community to engage and to support these anti-trafficking efforts. I want to just remind you that we're with three tremendous advocates, and if you're just joining us, we have Vicky Dix from UCount, based in Fort Collins and working in various parts of the world, particularly in India and Asia. And we have Clayton Butler here from Agape International Missions, working in Cambodia, now opening opportunities and beliefs in other parts of the world. And we have Christa Hagler with Amanecer in Oaxaca, Mexico. Now, I want to remind all of our attendees that as you're hearing these comments, we would love to get your comments. And so if you do have comments, if you do have questions, please feel free to add them into the chat bar and engage with us, and we'll have a chance to discuss those with you and with our panelists as time permits. Now, panelists, we talked about, you know, your work, and we talked about some of these challenges, and we're just, you know, scratching the surface of it. But I really believe that for all of us that are working in these arenas, we also have to bring the other side, which is the sense of hope and the sense of opportunity. None of us could be advocates on these very difficult topics if we didn't believe something could be done, right? And we all have victories and stories that we could share, but I want to kind of, you know, work our way around in the squares again to talk about some of the opportunities now. So we know that the challenges are there for demand, for learning, for knowledge, for understanding, all those things, but what are some opportunities for us to truly, you know, create some action and some momentum to addressing these issues? And I'll start with you, Vicky, if I could. What do you think would be a tremendous opportunity that you see in addressing this issue?
Well, I'm a very big advocate of prevention. And I just think if you can prevent a child from being in this space, you have saved them a lifetime of not having to deal with trauma. Just there's so many things. I think, as Clay was talking earlier, you know, this whole restoration, and once you rescue them, there's a lot of money involved, and there's a lot of counseling, there's a lot of just personal feelings that they have to work through. And so I just think there's I'm just a big advocate of prevention. So if we can save someone from ever entering into this space, we've saved them a lifetime of trauma. And so I think there is a lot of hope as we, mentioned earlier, as we create education around this, and just even working in our schools, trying to create awareness of like, this is what happens and this is how it looks. And, we do have a lot of vulnerable population right here in Northern Colorado and in the United States. And, our youth, they might be couch surfing and all this. And then they realize, next thing they might be having to, trade sex for, place to stay or something. But if they realize what's happening and they can advocate for themselves and be a voice and be like, I need to get out of this space, will, just be so much better. And so that's, one thing there. And then I just think even around the world, as we can all relate to what's been happening in Ukraine. And so many of these, as they've been migrating outside of, especially women and children, and an organization, I said earlier, working with Stop the Traffic, they were just making sure to create awareness to people to say, hey, if you're going to travel, you need to travel safely and know, here's the organizations you can work with, and here's the safe paths to get out, and here's the safe, places to go. And so I just think as we create more of this, informing people and telling them like, how to safely get out of their situation or how to safely find help, that we will slowly prevent this. And I really do believe, I think we're all in this because we believe that one day we can, work to solve this, and maybe it won't be in our lifetime, but that's what we're all working towards. And so anyway, I do have hope as we just continue to, inform people, and they're realizing like what can happen. And then they're, looking at those signs and they're working at ways to prevent from them ever being in this space. So, yeah, so I think, around the world and here, we can work to help prevent people from ever being trafficked in sex or labor. Yeah.
And what's so remarkable about that is, when you think about, like, let's say rescue, that's incredibly important, and we can count that, right? But when we have prevention, we can't really count it. It could be like enormous numbers because we'll never necessarily see who did it, right? And that's kind of a mind-blowing concept if you think about it. Like, think about how many people could be rescued in a sense by never ever having to be in that situation. And you mentioned a couple practical things, but one is, I think educating, especially our teens, but even younger ages, about the dynamics that could be happening around them and how they, again, we talked about vulnerabilities, how they can become more vulnerable. And most of the time when you talk about traffickers, they don't start as traffickers. They start as, being a so-called friend or a boyfriend or someone who's helping them out. And then it turns into something much more sinister. And so I think it's, watching for those signs and understanding that. I think it's also important for our community from a prevention standpoint to be looking for these signs, right? And to alert and let people know, whether it's, educators or whether it's, service providers or whether it's others in the health profession, to just be monitoring these signs that we need to be alert to as a community. So thank you for sharing that. Clay, I'm going to come over to you now. When you think about this topic, there are so many different challenges, and you provided both organizational challenges as well as these broader community challenges. But what about opportunities? What are some or a key opportunity that you see for addressing this issue?
There's almost too many to say, but I'll just kind of rattle off a million. So, if you're in a church, start praying. If you're a guy, and you're consuming pornography, get in a church group, support group, put an accountability software on your computer, be an example. If you're a pastor, start a program for men concerning demand. Giving, find an organization that's having impact. And if you want to make a solve every conceivable problem that your community face, jump into foster care. You talk about going upstream from homelessness, drug abuse, anti-trafficking. Probably the biggest, fastest, preventative, powerful way is for godly Christian families to go upstream in foster care. There's, I mean, I could talk all day long, but I would say there's always something practical to do. I would say, you know, you either give or you go, or you mobilize, and so figure out in what way God has positioned you and given you a passion. My dad was a business owner and really had a passion to give and to mobilize. It's funny, he gave to a lot of missions. He's given a lot of orphans and foster care throughout his life. But you take him on a mission he hates it. He just like put me in a hotel. Like he hates every bit of it, right? He didn't have a heart for it, but he has a heart to give and to mobilize. He's one of the most generous people. They're deeply passionate about it and wants other people to have that passion. So give, go, or mobilize. And there's a million ways to give. There's a lot of ways to mobilize, and there's a lot of ways to go, but count the cost, and have a skill. The thing my dad told me is you got to have, this is more specific to me, but he said you got to have more to offer than your white skin, your U.S. passport, and a bunch of tears. He said, you know, you better have a skill or something you're bringing. And so just because we have a passion and an ability, because we're blessed to be U.S. citizens, make sure we have some sort of skill that we're bringing that, or way we're empowering and mobilizing people on the ground. So I listed off maybe 15 ways to give or to do something, but if you need more,
well, and there's probably there's probably 15 more. But you know, I think the key is there's something for everyone to do. You know, I think that's the hope here, right? There's nobody, and literally nobody, that couldn't do something. You know, whether it is the donation, like you mentioned, or whether it is just, you know, learning about the topic, whether it's sharing about that topic with somebody else, whether it's taking care of that child, whether it's helping that, you know, person in distress. There's something that everybody could do, and it doesn't have to be monumental. I think sometimes what's difficult for a lot of people who are, you know, watching and hearing is, you know, they hear these inspiring stories of all of you doing what you do, but not everybody's in the position to do that, and that doesn't prevent them from being advocates. You can still be an advocate, and I think, Clay, you've given some very practical steps around that. Now, as we are, you know, kind of, you know, moving through, you know, sort of the last of our questions, I want to sort of come back to each of you in terms of what you've learned. You know, you don't necessarily have to give me a number of years, although you can reference that. But in the years that you have been doing this advocacy work, what have you personally learned about that work and about sort of just your experience in it? Clay, I'll start with you. How long have you been doing this work, first of all, Clay? This is
started late 2006, so too long. No, it's got high highs, low lows, but I don't know. If you're in it long enough, you have the built-in encouragement. It's awesome. You know, you get to see babies born, that you get to go to weddings, you get to go to all sorts of stuff that make the low bad, the high highs get better and better. Truth be told, what I learned, I take comfort knowing that God is more passionate about this issue than I am. And I'm not super central to the story. I think when I was young and full of less ego, I'm still full of ego, but when I was full of more ego at the time, you know, I was thinking, I'm making this happen. I'm rescuing, I'm doing this stuff. And then, oh, this is God's story. And he's allowed me to be part of this. And I found that to be deeply freeing once I realized that this wasn't me running around trying to rescue and restore victims of trafficking, but that God was doing this. He's passionate about it, and he allowed me to be part of being part of that story. And so I'd say that that's the biggest one, and that's the thing that stabilizes the whole ups and downs of the journey of that for me personally. So and it's 27 full. There we go. I looked it up while we're on the call. Back to my first reference.
Awesome. Well, that perspective is so important, and that humility is so important. When you're doing human rights work of any kind, what I always want to share with people is this is long range, right? And when we're talking about human trafficking, it is long range. There is no single person that is going to stop this particular issue, but it's that collective. And at the end of the day, it's not even the collective, it's what the Lord is going to do, right? And it is through his power that we're able to do any of these things. And so it's just being faithful and stepping out and doing your part with what you have to offer that makes the difference. And Clay, thank you so much for that perspective. Christa, I'm going to come to you. You've been doing this work and then working with this organization now for almost a year. What have you learned?
A lot. Constantly learning. I think I would piggyback what Clay said. We with our outreach to women in situations of prostitution at the local, like the outreach center, drop-in center, we do most of that through volunteers who volunteer their time to come and pour out and give to these women and give their time. And one of the things that we as the leadership tell them all the time is, it's not our job to rescue anybody. Don't come in with that burden. Our job is to love them. And our unique, our situation is that most of the women that we are interacting with on a daily basis are not minors, and therefore in our context, it's not illegal. And so our job is to love them and to give them a glimpse of how much Jesus loves them. And when you get a chance to put that into words, put it in words. And when you can't put it in words, do it with your actions. And so we repeat that over and over and over, because it is hard work and it is long work, and we leave really heavy burdened sometimes from the work. I mean, you carry those burdens with you. It's hard not to. And so if we can't trust that God loves them more than we do, we will burn out so fast. And so I think that's the biggest thing. And I think God has shown me personally how much he loves me by the simple act of just getting to be a part and showing up consistently for people who don't feel loved. Because how many years did God do that for me before I was ready to receive that? And so that's one of the biggest things I think I've learned is I know Jesus better today because of what I get to do than I did before I started. And so it's a privilege to get to, I'm sorry, it's a privilege to get to be a part of this and what we get to do. And it's too big for any one person to carry alone. It's too heavy, it's too hard. But everybody has a part to play. And so I would just encourage people to step into your piece and participate, because God has something to teach you too.
Remarkable. And, in some ways it feels like sometimes it's the same way for missions. You feel like you go into it to help, but really you're the one that's being helped, right? You get a deeper perspective, an understanding of yourself and your place in the world and your spiritual connectivity. And it's just, wonderful for you to share that. Thank you, Christa. Vicky, same question for you. You've been doing this work now, for many years with UCount, but also broadly. What have you learned?
Well, I think I can agree with everything that Clay and Christa have said, but I think for me, I've just maybe been more surprised at, I have sat down with many women here in Northern Colorado who have been, survivors, and even as I've traveled into Europe and Southeast Asia, and I just think the women, I just have an amazing love for them. And I think I just look at them and I'm like, they were just a normal person and some bad situation happened and that's where they're at. And And I just, yeah, I think the love for all of these women in the situations that they're in, I just can't explain it. And just so many times, I think it's just amazed at what God does in just transformation and restoration. And I'm quoting someone else who had said this, but we can take the girl out of the brothel, but it really takes God to take the brothel out of the girl. And I think that's so much of just seeing God move in situations and in girls' lives. And I've just loved that. I've loved being a part of that, and just love being able to, see where these women have come from and where they're going, and just see the hope that they have now. And so I think I appreciate organizations like Christa and Clay that they're in and working on the front lines and just showing Jesus to these people and women. I guess they're men and women, and then just just the amount of prayer, and then seeing how God can restore them. And so I just love, a lot of times, I never thought of this earlier until I was in this line of work, but we talk about in the Bible how God takes ashes and he makes it beautiful. And I love that, because he didn't ever say he just started all over with something new, but no, he takes our own lives, and even though they feel like ashes, they're still our ashes, and he made them into something beautiful. And so I think that's just what I enjoy, I think, the most of part of just being in this work, of just seeing the hope and how God has changed lives, and continuing to do it. And so I love people who are prayer warriors and who pray, because it's so important to hold up, the people's hands who are on the front lines and doing this work. And it's hard and it's tough what Clay and Christa do and what they see all the time. And so just really being able to know that, I'm not on the front lines all the time, but my prayer is being able to support all of them that are there. And so that's what I just think over the last years that I've been in this, that's what I've just enjoyed seeing, is just how God is in the redemptive work, and he's just still changing lives.
That's remarkable. I think one of the things I have appreciated about just what you're doing with UCount is just bringing in these other people to share in that experience, what you've learned, right? That those prayers matter, and that those supports matter, and that when they are purchasing these items, it makes a difference, and to just show those little drops in the bucket really do add up to a lot to so many. Well, yes. I want to also ask one more question that really is more direct for each of your organizations. Each of you are running advocacy organizations addressing the issue of human trafficking in different parts of the world. And for those that have joined us, I want to just remind you that we have Christa Hagler here with us from Amanecer, working in Oaxaca, Mexico. We have Vicky Dix from UCount that has ministry work that is done all over the world, but particularly in Asia and India. And we have Clayton Butler with us with Agape International Missions, working in Cambodia and now entering Belize and other parts of the globe as well, based out of Sacramento. Now, I want to ask each of you to share a little bit about what specifically our community can do to support your organization. And I'm going to start with you, Christa, this time. When you think about the work that you're doing, what is, one or more ways that our community can practically support your organization?
This is one I could probably ramble off many, like Clay did earlier. There are many. I think that Vicky just touched on a key one, and people hear that, and I think sometimes don't understand the weight of it, that prayer matters. That's a huge one. We are currently trying to grow this business and make it successful so that we can employ more women, which gives opportunity for more women to leave sex trafficking and have dignified employment. And so the smallest thing of purchasing a piece of jewelry to making a trip down here, seeing what we're doing, maybe taking pieces back with you, hosting a party, selling jewelry for us in your homes, being the advocate to raise awareness, even with sharing social media, as small as that is. You can share our stuff on social media, and that helps us to sell more jewelry. And it really, really does. We are completely sustained by the sales of that we're able to make. And so the ministry wouldn't exist, or this piece of the ministry wouldn't exist without people purchasing. And then always there's the opportunity to give financially. If you can't go, if you can't participate in a short-term trip, we actually do host some short-term trips and would like to do that more in the future with our outreach. So, you know, medical staff, people who can come down and provide different skills that we can then offer to the women in our locale, in our ministry building, who are able to do that. That's a huge blessing. So we're looking for people who are interested in making trips, but also just being the advocate there in the States and sharing what we're doing and praying and supporting, and then the financial giving so that we can continue to provide the services that we do provide. Because although we are doing the social enterprise to support the women, most of our money goes directly back into paying salaries and paying the women, and so all of our ministry expenses of outreaches to women and things that we're doing on the street, classes we can provide for the women, that all comes out of a separate fund that we raise money for. And so if someone wants to give, they can bless us in that way also.
Great, thank you, Christa. And Vicky, same question for you. What are some specific ways that individuals can support UCount?
Yes. Well, I can tell you, if you are in Fort Collins or Northern Colorado, you can actually volunteer with our organization, and you can, you know, come alongside all the other women that we have, and men, I guess, involved in our organization. So that would be one way. Another way is to donate, like Christa said. So we give to organizations globally and locally, and that work in prevention, awareness, and restoration. And so I like to tell people, when you give, you can know that your money's going to all around the world and is going to fight it in 3 different ways: prevention, awareness, and restoration. And so a lot of times, if you know, you don't know where to send your money to work in this space of human trafficking, you know, we have vetted a whole bunch of partners, and, you know, you can know your money's going where it's making a difference. And so also purchase. If you go to our website, UCountCampaign.org, you will find we have a store on there, and it has products that you can purchase. And so every time you purchase, you're given hope and dignity to the woman who made it. And so you can support us that way by doing that. And that just allows us to continue to buy more product and to help, you know, more women that have been are survivors or at risk of being trafficked. So that's, and pray. So volunteer, pray, donate, and purchase.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vicky. And then pray also. And how can we support Agape International Missions?
Yeah, a lot is the same of what's been mentioned. Pray. We're looking for people who want to partner with us in the long term financially. If you're asking me to be really honest, we need funds. We have opportunities in front of us, and some of them are nation-changing opportunities. And I'm saying, Lord, if you want us to go through that door, bring the donors. If not, give us the wisdom on which ones to do. But it is a very frustrating place to be leading an organization when you see life-changing opportunities, but not the funds to do that. So that's what I'm praying for. If you're asking me what my prayer is when I go to bed, there's a million ways to plug into. There's products that we make that you can buy. You want to get your church involved. We have mission trips for churches, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, be praying that God would bring the sacrificial donors of giving, and if not, then give us the wisdom on which opportunities to pursue.
Great, and I appreciate your frankness in that. And for those listening, you know, one of the things I would encourage you to pray for is also to pray where God is leading you to support. You know, there are so many organizations and so many wonderful causes, whether it's in your community or in other places. But on this issue, if this is one that breaks your heart, really pray ahead and see where God is leading you for your time, talent, and your treasure. Whether you're volunteering, whether you're supporting financially, whether you're helping and sharing the information, where do you want to be plugged in, but where is God specifically leading you to plug in? I think that's an important first step also in this awareness. Now, I want to take a few minutes to share a bit of information before we wind down our forum today. First of all, as you know, this is Global Justice, Human Trafficking Awareness Forum, and we present this each year. And throughout the year, we present many other forums on a wide variety of topics. Human trafficking is not limited to one day or 1 month. We are concerned about this topic throughout the year, but January is specifically the national month for addressing this issue of trafficking and slavery. And so we encourage you, especially during January, to share this information. This forum is recorded, and we will provide a video recording of this. So if you have individuals in your families, in your communities, among your circles that could really benefit from learning more about this topic, share the video, allow them to hear more about this. At Global, we are here to inform, impact, and inspire the generations to learn, lead, and do justice. And how we do that is by serving as a resource to the community. We want individuals, organizations, and communities to know that we're here. We're here to do things like gather great advocates together, to promote organizations and what they do, to help support in a wide variety of different ways, including research programs and projects. One that I want to highlight today is also our global market. Our global market is similar in some ways to what we see at UCount. And what we want to do is really help support a wide variety of artisans that are rescued from human trafficking, the refugee crisis, poverty, and other concerns, and allow them to thrive by having their own means of making a livelihood for themselves. So by supporting them through these products, we're able to make a real difference. And while we have started this organization a little later rather than UCount, we have also reached a 100,000 mark. And you know what? There's no competition. So one of the things I want you to be aware of is UCount and Global Market and what we do at Global Justice, we partner. We support one another. There's no problem having many of these outlets. So if you find something wonderful at UCount, purchase that item because you're helping support an individual and organization. Similarly, as you do that through the Global Market, through Global Justice, there are so many different avenues that you can go. So we encourage you to check them all out. And you can come visit our website as well as UCount. We have had the opportunity to share a wide variety of things through Global Market that highlight Agape International Missions as well as Amanecer. And so I just want to point to a couple things. So today I am wearing some beautiful earrings. This exquisite work. Yes, can you see them? And Christa too. We have these beautiful earrings that are made by these wonderful women that they work with at Amanecer. And these are hand beaded, absolutely stunning items. There's a wide variety of things that they have, and you can find them at that Global Market. And I'll give you the website and everything in a moment. And you can also connect with Christa, as she mentioned, to provide opportunities for expanding their resources for selling these items. I'm also wearing a t-shirt today. You can't see the entirety of the t-shirt, but it says Modern Day Abolitionist, and it has a wonderful quote, one of my favorite quotes, from William Wilberforce. And the quote says, "You can look away, you can choose to look away, but you can never say that you did not know." Once you know about this topic, you can make a choice to look away, but you can't say that you don't know that this is happening. And when you're in this forum today, we want to encourage you to be that beacon, to step out and share this message, share this light with many. And this t-shirt, by the way, if you love it, you can get that also through the Global Market, and it supports Agape International Missions. This is one of AIM's fabulous t-shirts, and they have a wide variety of other products, and we are so blessed to be able to offer those. Now, as I share all of this, I want you to know that at the end of the day, as much as we say shop for these earrings or shop for this t-shirt or go to UCount or go to Global Market, this is really not about shopping. This is about empowerment. Because when we are truly committed to helping people overcome their difficult circumstances so that they're not vulnerable, that they're not going to be susceptible to being trafficked or re-trafficked, it starts with giving them a place and a space where they can be empowered economically, socially, politically. And so this is just one easy way to do that. It's not the only way, but it is one way. And so we really encourage you to visit. Now, what I want to do is give a round to allow all of our audience members to visit our websites and get to know each of our organizations. So Christa, would you just tell us your website so that people can visit, or a way for them to connect with you?
We are actually about to launch our Amanecer website. We do have a G.L.O.B.A.L website, and I can type that into the chat so that it's spelled correctly. But also you can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram. We have G.L.O.B.A.L Project is our name on Instagram, and then Amanecer Jewelry is the name that we use on Instagram for the Amanecer branch of that. And so you can find us in both of those places, and hopefully, and I'll share the website for G.L.O.B.A.L, and hopefully in the next couple months, we'll be launching our Amanecer website officially. So.
Great, thanks so much. And as she's noted, if you have registered for this forum, we'll be sending you all these contacts as well. Vicky, would you share your contact?
Yes, so our website is UCountCampaign.org, and again, it's the letter U, and then UCount campaign. We are also on Facebook, and it's UCount. And then on Instagram, we're also there too, and it's UCount NoCo for Northern Colorado. So those are 3 different areas you can follow us and reach us and see what we're doing.
Wonderful. And Clay?
Our website is aimfree.org, and we got whatever your brand of social media is, we got something for you. But if not, aimfree.org is a great place to connect.
Great. And for those of you interested in learning more about what we do at Global Justice, you can visit us at www.globaljusticeonline.org. And to visit the global market, it's just /GLBL-MRKT, Global Market. Now, as we close our time together, I want to thank Christa Hagler, Vicky Dix, and Clay Butler for sharing not just your work, but your hearts for justice, your hearts for addressing this particular injustice, and we're so grateful to each of you. I also want to thank our audience for joining us in this live session, for engaging with us in this conversation. And as noted, we are recording this session, and we'll be providing that recording very soon so that you can share it with many others. In addition, we do provide a number of other opportunities to engage in justice issues. And I just want to highlight that in this month, which as I mentioned is January, and it is our national month for prevention of trafficking and slavery, this same context gives us an opportunity to share some other related topics. At the end of this month, we're going to be hosting a forum related to homelessness. This is a regional forum based on a regional study that we're conducting that is looking at this issue in our area of Northern Colorado. And we're also looking at this issue more broadly in Colorado as well as in other regions. We're looking forward to sharing that regional study as well as sharing a wide variety of expert panelists at an on-site forum that will also be live streaming. So we encourage you to join us on January 28th. That's a Saturday morning, and that's an opportunity to talk about some of those vulnerabilities that might make people more susceptible to issues like human trafficking. In addition, we have a number of other events that we do on site at Micah Place, which is the home of Global Justice, that allows us to not just share about a particular issue, but also about regions. We host a monthly tea that looks at different parts of the world. This month, we're highlighting Eastern Europe. Vicky mentioned Ukraine as an example of one of the areas that we're concerned about in Eastern Europe. And we also host a monthly coffee. And the coffee and the conservatory event is a chance to learn about fair trade and sustainable coffee production, particularly highlighting the Guatemala region. And so we have many different opportunities to talk about these issues and many others throughout each month. So this month, come join us for any and all of these. And then for this forum, we look forward to not only offering this particular online forum, but others in the near future, including on issues related to women and children, refugees, and other topics. So we thank you all so much. So Christa Hagler of Amanecer, Vicky Dix of UCount, and Clay Butler of Agape International Missions, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you to our audience. God bless you. We'll see you again next time.